"Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," Maya said, and the CEO's smile instantly faded. The room went dead silent. Maya Williams, dressed in a simple black suit with a subtle, professional demeanor, stood in front of a long marble table, surrounded by a dozen of the most powerful executives in the room. The CEO, Richard Stevens, leaned back in his chair, a smug grin on his face as he reviewed the contract in his hands. He was used to being in control. He was used to getting what he wanted. But Maya's voice, clear and unwavering, shattered his confidence in an instant. "What do you mean, a trap?" Richard's tone was sharp, but his eyes flickered with unease. Maya looked at him calmly, the weight of the moment settling around her like a heavy fog. "You didn't notice it, but this clause will make your company liable for all the debts from the merger, not theirs. If anything goes wrong, your company bears the full risk, and they walk away clean." She pointed to the fine print on page 14 of the merger agreement. Richard's eyebrows furrowed. He hadn't noticed. In fact, none of them had. His grip tightened around the papers in his hand, and the smile that had once graced his face slowly vanished. "That's absurd," Richard muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. A hush spread through the room as the executives exchanged uneasy glances. Maya stood firm, her posture straight and unflinching, while Richard shifted in his chair, visibly unsettled. "You're a janitor." One of the executives finally spoke up, trying to undermine Maya's credibility. "What do you know about contracts?" Maya's gaze didn't waver. She had heard it all before. She was used to being underestimated, to being seen as nothing more than a cleaning staff member. But this time, she wasn't backing down. "I may clean the floors, but I know how to read contracts," she replied calmly. "And I suggest you all do the same before you sign away everything you've worked for." The tension in the room grew thicker. Richard's face flushed a deep shade of red. The laughter and whispers from the other executives were replaced by silence. Maya had turned the table on them. The arrogance of the powerful had met the quiet strength of someone they had never bothered to truly see. For a moment, Richard simply stared at her. He was used to the best legal minds in the room, but none had caught the mistake. None had read the fine print as thoroughly as she had. His thoughts raced, and for the first time, he felt the crushing weight of the situation. Maya had just saved his company from a catastrophic financial mistake. Slowly, Richard set the contract down on the table. His hands trembled slightly, something that hadn't happened in years. "Check the clause," Maya said again, her voice steady but sharp. Richard motioned to his legal team, who quickly went through the pages, flipping to the crucial section. The room fell even more silent as they read. It was exactly as Maya had said. He was exposed. The truth had been revealed. Maya wasn't just a janitor. She was the one who had saved them all. She had seen what they hadn't. And for the first time that day, Richard Stevens couldn't hide behind his wealth, his power, or his title. He could only face the truth that Maya had uncovered. Maya stood there, unmoved, as the room slowly came to life again with hushed conversations. Richard didn't speak. He just nodded, and for the first time, Maya saw something in his eyes. It wasn't anger or the dismissive arrogance she had grown used to seeing. It was respect. "I don't care what excuse you have," Richard muttered, his voice cold, but the uncertainty still lingered beneath his words. He wasn't used to this. Maya stood firm, unaffected by the tension that gripped the room. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity as the executives glanced nervously at one another. Richard's usual confidence was slipping. "You're fired," he finally said, trying to regain control. "Get out." The words were harsh, meant to cut, to remind her of her place. But Maya didn't flinch. She wasn't going anywhere, not without making her point. She had done her job. "You're making a mistake, Richard," she said quietly, her voice unwavering. "You're not listening." For a moment, Richard's eyes hardened, but he couldn't bring himself to ignore the truth that hung in the air. "Leave," he repeated, his tone sharp, but his face was no longer filled with the anger he had once felt. Maya simply nodded, turning toward the door, but before she stepped out, she glanced back at him. "I did my job," she said, her voice carrying through the room. "And I saved you from losing everything." As she walked out of the room, the sound of her footsteps echoed behind her, and she knew she had left an impression. In the hall, she paused for a moment, standing still, letting the weight of the situation settle in. She wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just a cleaning lady who didn't belong in these rooms. She was someone who had just prevented a financial disaster for one of the richest men in the country. And that, in itself, meant something. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the rush of finally standing up for what was right. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, but she couldn't let herself forget the deeper reason for why she had spoken up. It wasn't just about saving a company or proving a point. It was about respect. It was about the fact that she had earned her place in that room, and not just because of what she had done, but because of who she was. As she reached the elevator, Maya pressed the button and waited for the doors to open. The quiet hum of the elevator was the only sound that filled the space around her. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but she knew this was just the beginning. This moment would change things. She was changing things. When the elevator door slid open, she stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished metal walls, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The world wasn't going to keep her invisible any longer. She had earned her place. She was more than just a maid. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the elevator descended, she thought about what was next. Would Richard apologize? Would the other executives finally recognize her value? She didn't know, but it didn't matter. She had already won. She had shown them all that it wasn't about your title or the color of your skin. It was about what you bring to the table, and Maya Williams had just proven she brought a hell of a lot. I've never seen anything like this before, Richard Stevens muttered to himself as he stood in front of the large windows of his office, staring out at the city skyline. The events of the day played over in his mind, each moment sharper than the last. He had tried to brush off Maya's words, dismiss her as just another lowly staff member, but he couldn't shake the truth that had been revealed. He ran his hand through his hair, frustration mounting. The room was still and quiet, but his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had always prided himself on being in control, on knowing everything that went on in his company. But this one woman had shattered that illusion. It wasn't just about the contract. It was about respect, and about seeing things clearly for the first time. He couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, he had misjudged Maya Williams. His office door opened with a soft creak, and his assistant, Clara, stepped in, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked cautiously. Richard didn't look at her right away. "I've made a mistake," he said quietly, the words barely audible. Clara blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "Maya," he said, his voice heavier now. "She's right. About the clause. About everything." Clara's eyes widened. "But she's just a janitor, Richard. How could she?" "That's just it," Richard interrupted, finally turning to face her. "She's not just a janitor. She saw something no one else did. And she didn't just point it out. She saved this company from disaster." Clara stood still for a moment, her mouth slightly open in shock. She had always seen Maya as nothing more than an invisible figure, just another face in the crowd of employees who cleaned the office and served the executives. But hearing Richard's words made her pause. Was Maya really someone to be underestimated? Richard walked over to his desk, grabbing the contract Maya had pointed out earlier. The pages were still slightly crinkled from being handled by so many hands. He flipped through it again, this time paying close attention to the fine print. Maya had been right all along. She had caught a critical flaw that could have cost them millions. He couldn't believe it had taken a janitor to notice what his top executives had missed. For a moment, Richard felt a twinge of embarrassment. How could he have been so blind? "I need to see her," he said, his voice firm. "Now." Clara hesitated. "Sir, you mean Maya?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Yes. I need to speak with her. I need to apologize." He had never apologized to anyone in his entire career. But this time, something had shifted inside him. He couldn't keep pretending he was above everyone else. He had to do what was right. He had to make it right. Clara nodded slowly, then turned to leave. As she walked out, Richard sat back in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. He was still reeling from the realization of how much he had overlooked. Maya was different from everyone else in that room. She had shown him something he hadn't seen before, that strength wasn't about titles, money, or power. It was about integrity. It was about standing up, even when the world told you to sit down. And for the first time in a long time, Richard felt like he needed to learn that lesson himself. "I've called for her," Richard said, his voice laced with a rare vulnerability as he paced across his office, his hands running through his hair. The weight of his earlier realization hung over him like a storm cloud, thick and unrelenting. He had spent the last few hours trying to reconcile what had happened, the unexpected truth that had come from the most unlikely of places. Maya, the janitor, had done what his most trusted executives couldn't. She had seen through the fine print and saved the company from ruin. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He needed to meet her. He needed to make things right. Outside his office, Clara watched him, waiting for the moment when he would come to terms with what was happening. "She's downstairs," Clara said softly, breaking the silence. Richard nodded, taking a deep breath before turning toward the door. He wasn't sure what he expected, but he knew this moment would define something for him. When he reached the elevator, he stepped inside, the doors sliding shut behind him with a soft thud. The elevator ride was quiet, the hum of the machine filling the space between his thoughts. Maya had already done the impossible. She had proved herself in a way no one had expected. He wasn't sure how she would respond to his apology, but he knew one thing. He couldn't just let this slip away. As the elevator descended, Richard's thoughts turned inward. How could he have been so blind? How could he have overlooked someone like Maya, someone who had so much more to offer than anyone had ever realized? The doors opened with a soft chime, and Richard stepped into the lobby. Maya stood at the far end, her posture calm and composed, just like she had been during the meeting. She wasn't looking at him yet, but he could see her from across the room. She was the same as always, focused, diligent, a quiet strength that somehow filled the room without even trying. Richard walked toward her slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the large, empty space. Maya looked up, her eyes locking with his as he approached. She didn't flinch or look away. There was no sign of fear, no hesitation. She was waiting for him to speak. "Maya," Richard began, his voice steady but filled with something new, respect. "I owe you an apology." Maya stood there, her face unreadable, but her eyes remained focused on him, waiting. Richard hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. How do you apologize to someone who had just saved your company? How do you make amends for ignoring someone's worth for so long? "You were right," he said finally. "About everything. I didn't listen when I should have. I've always thought that my position gave me all the answers, but you proved me wrong." There was a long pause before Maya spoke, her voice calm and measured. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of her words. For the first time, he realized that Maya's actions weren't about proving a point or seeking recognition. She had acted with integrity, with a sense of duty that went beyond the walls of the office, beyond the titles and positions that so many people were obsessed with. "You've taught me a lot," Richard said quietly. "More than anyone else ever has." Maya didn't respond right away, but she gave him a slight nod, acknowledging his words without the need for further explanation. There was a sense of finality in the way she stood, a quiet strength that spoke volumes. "I'll leave you to it," she said, turning toward the exit. Richard stood there for a moment, watching her walk away. He realized something profound in that moment. Maya wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just a background figure in the corporate world. She was someone who had the power to change things, to shape the future in ways he had never imagined. And for the first time, Richard knew he wasn't the only one with power in the room. "I cannot believe this," Richard muttered to himself as he sat alone in his office, the weight of the day still pressing on him. The truth had finally set in. Maya had opened his eyes in ways no one else ever had. He had spent his entire career surrounded by people who worshipped status, who believed that money and power could solve any problem. Yet, Maya, someone who was meant to be invisible, had been the one to save him, to expose the truth. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap his mind around it. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he had underestimated her. He had been blind to her worth for so long, focused only on the title she held. But now, he saw her for who she really was. Smart, sharp, and capable of more than anyone had ever given her credit for. As the days passed, Richard's thoughts kept returning to Maya. He found himself replaying the moment she had spoken up during the meeting, the calm way she had pointed out the flaw in the contract. It was a moment that had completely changed the trajectory of his company, but more than that, it had changed him. He had never been one to admit his mistakes, but Maya had forced him to. She had shown him that true leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the richest. It was about doing what was right, even when no one else was looking. Richard knew he had to do something to make things right. He couldn't just leave it at an apology. Maya deserved more than that. After some reflection, Richard reached out to her. He knew that offering her a higher position in the company wouldn't be enough. It had to be something that acknowledged the value she brought not only to the company, but to him personally. He set up a meeting with Maya, but this time, it wasn't in a boardroom or a corporate setting. It was in a small, quiet room at the back of the office. Maya entered, her expression neutral, but there was a sense of curiosity in her eyes. Richard stood up as she walked in. "Maya," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "Thank you for everything you've done." Maya nodded, but there was no smile on her face. She wasn't looking for praise, Richard could tell. "I've thought about what you said," Richard continued. "And I know I didn't recognize your worth before. But I want to change that. I want to offer you a position in the company. A real one. Not just a janitor, not just a background figure. You deserve to be seen. You've already proven you can save this company, and I want to give you the opportunity to help shape its future." Maya stood still for a moment, processing his words. Richard could see the hesitation in her eyes, the uncertainty that lingered. She had never been treated like this before, and it was clear that she wasn't used to being offered something she didn't have to fight for. "I'm not doing this to make up for the past," Richard said, his voice softening. "I'm doing this because I believe in you. I see now that you're capable of far more than what I initially thought, and I want to give you the chance to show that to the world." Maya's expression softened slightly, but she still didn't speak. Richard stood there, waiting for her to process everything. The silence stretched on, but for the first time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a moment of genuine understanding. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice calm but filled with determination. "I'll take it," she said simply. Richard felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Good," he replied, offering a small smile. "You've earned it." As Maya left the room, Richard couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about respect, about seeing people for who they truly were, and giving them the opportunity to rise. Richard had learned something valuable that day, something he would never forget. Leadership was about empowering others, not just elevating yourself. And Maya had shown him that. Maya sat at her desk, her hands folded in front of her as she looked out the window. The city stretched out before her, a sprawling mass of glass and steel, but today it felt different. Today, she was no longer a janitor, no longer someone who blended into the background. She was a part of something bigger now, a part of the company she had saved, and a part of a future she never thought possible. The phone on her desk buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from Richard. "Can you meet me for lunch?" it read. She smiled to herself. It had only been a few days since he had offered her the new position, and already she was seeing changes in the way people treated her. She had gone from being invisible to being recognized, and it was a strange, exhilarating feeling. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out of her office. As she made her way down the hallway, she could feel the eyes of the other employees on her, but this time, she didn't shrink back. She walked with confidence, her head held high. She had earned this. When she arrived at the cafe, Richard was already waiting. He stood up as she approached, his usual professional demeanor replaced with a softer, more genuine smile. "Maya, I'm glad you could make it," he said, motioning for her to sit down. Maya smiled back. "Of course. I thought I would take you up on your offer." Richard nodded, clearly pleased with her response. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began. "About how leadership isn't just about power, about how it's about seeing people for who they really are. You've really made me rethink the way I've been running things." Maya took a sip of her drink, listening intently. She had always known that Richard had potential, but it was clear now that he was starting to realize it too. "I've been making changes," Richard continued. "I've been making sure to listen to the people around me, really listen. And it's made a huge difference. Not just in the company, but in my life. I'm starting to understand that leadership isn't about holding on to control. It's about empowering others." Maya nodded, appreciating his sincerity. She had always believed in the power of helping others rise, and it was heartening to see Richard begin to adopt that mindset. "I've also been thinking about the role you're going to play here," Richard said, his tone shifting slightly. "I want you to have a real impact. I want you to help shape the company's future. Your insights, your perspective, they matter. And I want to make sure you have every opportunity to show that. Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. This was more than just a job offer. It was a chance to make a difference, not just for herself, but for others too. I appreciate that, she said softly. But I'm just getting started. There's so much more I want to do. Richard smiled, clearly impressed by her ambition. I know, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you'll achieve. You've already done so much. Maya leaned back in her chair, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had fought for this moment, and now it was hers. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it. And as she sat there with Richard, discussing plans for the company's future, she knew that this was only the beginning of something incredible. She had proven herself, not just to Richard, but to herself. She had found her voice, and now there was no turning back. Maya sat in her new office, staring at the city skyline. The glass walls of her office offered a stunning view of the city below, but she wasn't looking at the view. She was thinking about everything that had led to this moment. It had been a whirlwind few weeks since she had been offered the new position. The transition hadn't been easy. She had gone from cleaning the office floors to sitting at the head of a department, from being invisible to being an integral part of the company's future. The weight of it all was sometimes overwhelming. But today, Maya felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had earned this. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Richard, meeting in 10 minutes. Ready to go over the new plan. Maya took a deep breath and stood up. The journey she had started was only beginning, and today was another important step forward. She had been part of something much larger than just a job. She had shown everyone, including herself, that her worth wasn't tied to her title or her place in the company. As she made her way down the hallway, she passed by some of the other employees. She could feel their eyes on her, but this time, it wasn't the kind of glance that made her want to shrink back. This time, it was different. She walked with purpose, her steps steady and confident. She had found her voice, and now she was using it to shape her future. When she entered the conference room, Richard was already there, sitting at the table, reviewing some documents. He looked up as she walked in, his expression softening into a smile. Maya, he greeted her warmly. Glad you could make it. Of course, Maya replied, taking a seat across from him. She had spent enough time working under his leadership to understand the importance of these meetings, but now, she was no longer just an observer. She was part of the conversation, part of the decision-making process. Richard didn't waste any time. Let's get started. I know you've been reviewing the new project proposals. What do you think? Maya looked over the papers in front of her. They were filled with numbers, charts, and strategies, but what caught her attention were the details, the small things that most people overlooked. I think there's a gap in the strategy, she said, pointing to one of the charts. We're focusing too much on short-term gains without considering the long-term sustainability. If we keep going this way, we risk overlooking the bigger picture. Richard leaned forward, intrigued by her insight. You're right, he said. I hadn't thought about it that way. Maya continued. We need to integrate a more sustainable approach to the plan, one that considers the future of the company and the impact on our employees and community. Richard nodded slowly, clearly impressed. Maya had spoken up before, but this time, it felt different. Her voice wasn't just heard, it was respected. As the meeting progressed, Maya found herself speaking more, offering ideas, and contributing to the direction of the company. By the time they wrapped up, Richard turned to her with a smile. I'm glad you're on board with this. You've got a sharp mind, Maya. I can't wait to see where this takes us. Maya smiled back, feeling a sense of pride swelling inside her. She had done it. She had gone from being an overlooked employee to someone whose opinion was valued. But even more than that, she had helped shape the future of the company. She had found her place, not just in the company, but in the world. As she left the meeting, Maya felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had always believed that change started with one person, and now she knew that person was her. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Maya felt ready for whatever came next. Maya stood in front of the large windows of her office, watching as the city moved below her. It had been a few months since she had taken on her new role, and so much had changed. The transition from janitor to department head had been jarring, but now, as she looked at the city skyline, she felt a sense of calm. She had earned this, every bit of it. Her phone buzzed on her desk, and she turned her attention to it. It was a message from Richard. "I need to speak with you when you have a moment." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen Richard much lately, as he had been focused on a few major projects, and she had been busy settling into her new position. She texted back, "I'm free now," and waited for his reply. A few moments later, he responded with, "Great, come to my office." Maya stood up, smoothing her skirt and taking a deep breath. She had worked hard to get here, and she had proven herself to everyone, including Richard. But still, she wondered what this meeting was about. When she arrived at Richard's office, he looked up from his desk and smiled. "Maya, come in. Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Maya sat down, her curiosity piqued. "What's on your mind, Richard?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Richard leaned forward, his eyes serious but warm. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately, Maya. About what you've done for this company, and for me. You've made a real impact here, and I don't think I've properly acknowledged that." Maya raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You've already given me a chance, Richard. I'm just doing my job." Richard shook his head. "No, it's more than that. You've done more than just your job. You've changed the way I see leadership. You've made me realize that. It's not just about having the right answers or making the right calls. It's about seeing people for who they really are. And that's what you've taught me." Maya felt a warmth in her chest at his words. "I just wanted to do what was right," she said quietly. Richard smiled, a proud gleam in his eyes. "And that's why I want to offer you something more. I want to offer you a bigger role, one where you can truly shape the future of this company. Not as a janitor, not as someone in the background, but as a leader." Maya blinked, her heart racing. She had known this day would come, but hearing it from Richard was still overwhelming. "What kind of role are you talking about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on his desk. "I'm creating a new position for you, Maya. It's a leadership role, but one that focuses on company culture, employee engagement, and long-term growth. You'll have the freedom to make real changes, to shape the future of this place. And I'll be here to support you every step of the way." Maya's mind raced as she processed his words. This was more than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about making a difference, about being seen, about using her voice for change. "I don't know what to say," Maya said, her voice a little shaky. Richard smiled again, a reassuring look on his face. "You don't have to say anything, Maya. You've already shown me everything I needed to see. I just want you to know that you have my full support, and I believe in you." Maya felt a sense of pride and gratitude wash over her. This was her moment. This was what she had been working for, what she had dreamed of. She had proven that anyone, no matter their background, could rise to the occasion. "Thank you, Richard," she said, her voice steady now. "I won't let you down." Richard nodded. "I know you won't. And I'm excited to see everything you'll do." As Maya left his office, she felt a sense of clarity. She was no longer just a part of the company. She was part of its future. She had found her place, and now it was time to make a real difference. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Maya felt ready to take on whatever came next. She had already proven to herself, and to everyone around her, that she was more than capable of achieving greatness. Maya stood in front of the conference room, taking a deep breath before entering. Her new role had felt like a whirlwind of change, and while she had embraced it, she couldn't help but feel a rush of nerves. Today was the day that everything she had worked for would come to a head. The quarterly meeting with the executive team was about to begin, and for the first time, she wasn't just sitting in the back, taking notes. She was leading the discussion. As she stepped into the room, the eyes of the team were on her. She had seen these faces before, faces that had once been indifferent to her presence, even dismissive at times. But today, she was different. Today, they were all waiting for her. Maya took her place at the head of the table, feeling the weight of her new responsibilities, but she also felt something else, empowerment. She had earned this. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Let's get started." The room fell silent as she pulled up the presentation on the screen. She could feel the tension in the air, but it wasn't the kind of tension she was used to. It wasn't the kind of tension that came from feeling small, feeling overlooked. It was the kind of tension that came from being in charge, from having the power to shape the conversation. As Maya moved through the presentation, laying out her vision for the future of the company, she could see the shift in the room. They were listening. not just because she was now in charge, but because she had earned their respect. When she finished, there was a pause. Richard, who had once been her mentor, was the first to speak. "I have to say, Maya, I'm impressed," he said, his tone genuine. "Your plan is thorough, thoughtful, and exactly what we need. You've proven time and again that you are the right person for this role." Maya smiled, but it was a smile that came from a place of pride. "Thank you, Richard. But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us, working together to make this company better." The room was quiet for a moment before one of the other executives spoke up. "Maya, I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I've never seen someone step into a leadership role with such clarity and vision. We're lucky to have you." Maya felt a rush of gratitude wash over her. It had taken years of hard work, of proving herself time and time again. But now she was here, leading a team of people who not only recognized her talent, but valued it. As the meeting continued, Maya's confidence grew. She wasn't just managing a department now. She was managing the future of the company. She was setting the course, making decisions that would affect the direction of everything. And for the first time, she felt fully in control. After the meeting, as everyone filed out of the room, Richard lingered behind. "Maya," he said, approaching her, "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. You've come so far, and I know this company is in good hands with you leading it." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Richard. That means more than you know." Richard smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've earned every bit of it." As Maya walked back to her office, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of accomplishment. This was what she had worked for, what she had fought for. She had gone from a janitor to the head of a department, and now she was leading the company into the future. The journey had been long and difficult, but every challenge had shaped her into the leader she was today. Maya had found her place, and she knew she was ready for whatever came next.